One of the most rewarding things I think they say is to do what people say you cannot do. It's a quote that I love. It's to do what people say you cannot do. And the Shazam story is very much that. There were so many people that said we can't do it. And I think people relate to that because we all have that in our life. Many of us have experienced something where people told us, nope, you can't do that. And then we went ahead and we powered through and we did it. Could be a personal thing, could be a professional thing. But when you do that, that is so incredibly rewarding.
You've been Shazammed, and it's Chris Barton's fault. He's our guest today on our podcast for the Keynote Curators. Chris is the inventor and founder of the world-renowned app Shazam. He's also an entrepreneur and a tech investor. In our conversation, we cover the mindset that is required to be a successful entrepreneur and leverage innovation to move your organization's business outcomes forward. It's a fascinating conversation. We appreciate you listening in. You're going to be smarter for it. Hello and welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators podcast. Our guest today is Chris Barton. You're going to learn a lot about Chris, his past being an inventor, working with Google, the well-known app that everybody has on their phone. But really, Chris, I just want to welcome you and provide you the opportunity to introduce yourself and let us know what you want us to know about you.
Hi, well, I'm Chris, and thanks for having me here today, Seth. Let's see, I guess, don't know where to start, but I'll just give you the super quick version. Yes, I'm the original founder, CEO of Shazam, started the company with 3 other co-founders way back in 2000, 22 years ago. It was an 18-year journey until it reached its exit, where it was acquired in 2018 by Apple. I've also worked at Google, almost 8 years at Google. I joined them in 2004, just a few months before they were a public company. They were only 2,000 employees, and I was the first mobile partnerships employee at Google. So I did a lot of the mobile partnerships with large carriers, and as well as for the Android system. And then I also worked at Dropbox and joined them when they were a 90-person scrappy startup. So I've filed 12 patents. I'm an inventor, an innovator, a creator, and I like to think about, I like to talk about and speak about all the learnings that I've gathered over the years on how you kind of think creatively and come up with great innovations and really just how to think differently to lead to great outcomes. Because a lot of times it's the persistence, just overcoming obstacles and doing things in a very different way that leads to the great outcomes.
Thank you. It is a way to say, I don't know where to start because it's so broad sweeping, wide ranging, and so many different nooks and crannies. You really could go down any road and talk for a while. I want to dive in the deep end here, Chris. And, I shared with you a little bit as we prepared for this. Our listeners today, who the majority of them are meeting planners, conference planners, meeting professionals, the very ones that we both work with when you go out and deliver your keynotes. You said you can address disruptive thinking and game-changing innovation. And you mentioned the app Shazam, which I think many of us, including me and my whole family, have on our phone. And I literally use it. I wouldn't say every day, but I would say 2 to 3 times a week. I'm somewhere. Often, Chris, I'm at an event where there's some intro music or some music as a general session is being seated. And I'm like, oh man, I need that on my playlist. And I just pop it out and literally, I don't know, 10 seconds, depending on how agile I am in the moment, I'll be able to deploy your great vision there. I want to dive in the deep end a little bit here because as I was preparing for this, I love the comment that you made or a phrase that you used about entrepreneurs, and correct me if I'm wrong. What was it? Was it experience partners?
Oh, sometimes within the entrepreneurial community, we often refer to them as co-founders as the standard word, but I like to call them co-experiencers because they're not only founding a company with them, you're actually going through a life experience as part of founding a company with them.
Yeah, and the reason why I want to underscore that, the co-experience, because that really spoke to me. I have a lot of editorial comment about entrepreneurs and co-founders. And frankly, those that are already planning an exit before they've even made one widget is a little bit, I can't relate to that. But what I like the co-experience is with meeting planners and meeting professionals, they're almost building this pop-up. There's an event, there's a timeline, registration opens, There's rehearsals, there's build up, there's agendas being created, sponsors, signage, security, food and beverage, ground transportation, all these experiences with their internal team and then for their attendees. And in today's world where the landscape is changing in every industry, I'd like to get your thoughts on that concept and the experiences that you've had with meeting planners and what you might have to say about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think the experience is what it's all about at these events, right? And I mean, it's actually something that I take to heart. I mean, even when I created Shazam, I was so obsessed with what is the experience going to be. I was obsessed with what's the name Shazam. It's got to be something memorable, magical, something that really correlates to the experience. And then the experience has got to be quick, and you've got to have a nice, delightful, colorful result, and so on. And similarly, I think about the same things as a keynote speaker. I mean, the easy thing to do when you're telling a story about founding a company that people are familiar with would just be to tell this story. But I realized, gosh, I want this to be amazing. I want people to be so engaged and just walk away having laughed and cried and gone through a roller coaster of experiences and really been moved by the speech. So I actually spent a lot of time in creating what I call a sort of a cinematic, inspiring, emotional speech. And I weave in music and video, stories that are jaw-dropping and surprising to the audience. And I want them to feel that experience of what it's like to be someone who's, for me as a founder, is vulnerable and concerned about, can this succeed, and making them realize that really anyone can do this. But look what you go through. All the uncertainty, the downtimes, almost going bankrupt, almost not being able to achieve the things you need to achieve to make it succeed. And then finally, getting through all these hurdles for a really an amazing outcome, and taking them through that roller coaster with, as I said, this sort of cinematic component of music and so on.
I think that conference planners appreciate that. Not I think, I know, because the work that you deliver, is captivating and provides an immediate impact for attendees. There's takeaways that they can apply to their business, whatever stage they're in, whether it's a startup, whether they're dealing with a team, whether there's a merger, even in the aspect of cultures where you need to be creative, you need to collaborate, you need to disrupt and innovate to evolve a culture in so many ways. Chris, you speak about the mindset and how innovations, collaboration are sourced from really the mindset. And from what I remember, you're saying you have to come from zero. And when you were at MIT and Stanford, and your mentors, your professors who told you that it was impossible to build something like Shazam, where an application could recognize music patterns, and not just recognize them, but do it on a kind of a Nokia or whatever flavor of the month cell phone was the most advanced at that point, which now looks like Pleistocene era. Share with us how your mindset was able to overcome those naysayers and keep you kind of on course, navigating forward.
Yeah, and I should clarify that I wasn't actually at Stanford or MIT, Seth, but I was actually at Berkeley, both undergraduate and MBA.
Okay.
But you're right though, because you caught on to some of my story. I did the places where I went to find a genius to invent the technology were MIT and Stanford, because they had the two best departments that were focused on audio signal processing, PhDs in this area. And so there are many aspects to the mindset of a great innovation and a great entrepreneur. I call them start from zero, as you mentioned. It's sort of what I branded them, and I break them into 5 key ones, which are, I won't go into too much detail, but basically they come down to thinking differently so that you really come up with great solutions. I call that build from basic truths. And then basically thinking creatively, because you're going to hit many, many obstacles, even when you have a great idea. And I call that creative persistence. So it's not just being persistent, but being creative with your solutions. And then what I call picking your obsession, which is to have a kind of a big insight that is the thing that you're going to stay true to, despite all the resistance that you might face from all over the place, and even your own co-founders, your own investors, board members, and so on.
And your own inner voice.
Yeah, there's resistance from everywhere. But if you want to get to that path of that amazing outcome, you've really got to stay true to that vision, that conviction you have, and whatever this core insight is. And then eliminating friction along the way, because it's amazing how we underassume how much a little bit of friction can really kill the experience for users. And if you don't eliminate that friction and then just make it a seamless, delightful experience, then you won't achieve an outcome that's delightful to users, which means that you won't have great success. And then finally, powering your way through all this, you really have to be kind of personally connected. I call it connect to emotions. So it's not just, we tend to think, okay, this is our professional life and this is our personal life. And we apply a sort of different type of dedication to those things. But what really leads to great outcomes is in your professional life when you are so personally connected to it. So one example I give is, imagine that you were building a house. Someone said, please build this house. But now imagine that you said that house you're building is actually going to be your home, the home that you're going to live in. So the difference, what's the difference between when you build a house and you think it needs windows and a door and so on, and then you're building a home where you put really the extra personal effort in because you want it's going to be the home that you're going to live in. Which direction is it going to face? Where's the light going to come in? You want everything to be amazing. And if you apply that personal level of building a home to everything that you do, then the professional outcome will be incredible. So it's this thinking differently, but part of that is overcoming these obstacles. And it's amazing how these creative solutions can help you do that. And just to give one quick example, originally there was no technology for Shazam. And in fact, all these PhDs out of Stanford and MIT said, frankly, this is impossible. There is no technology that can identify songs out of thin air with noisy backgrounds. It didn't exist. And it was an incredibly difficult pattern recognition problem to solve. They had no idea how to do it, even though they were PhDs and professors at MIT and Stanford. And I'm thinking, well, I just am determined that we've got to be able to do this. So this is very different than building a business like Facebook, Snapchat, where you're just sort of building something. This was not as simple as just hire engineers and build it. We actually had to invent something, more like a biotech company. We had to invent something first and then build it from there. But where I was really nervous is that I thought, well, if I'm going to pick this one genius to be a co-founder and to be the fourth co-founder of Shazam, but the guy that's going to invent this technology, this person is going to be a PhD out of Stanford or MIT in audio signal processing. But how am I going to know who the best, smartest guy is? Because guy or gal, because I have no idea how to assess this. I mean, frankly, even if they just showed me the paper they were reading a few hours before I met them, I would have no idea what that means either. I just didn't understand it. And so I'm thinking, well, how am I going to pick the smartest person? Because I don't even understand this stuff. And so my creative solutions, I thought, I know, I'm not going to pick them. A professor at Stanford is. And so I went to this professor at Stanford who is worldwide eminent in the field of computer music and technology. He had invented the algorithms and the Yamaha synthesizers, and he was worldwide eminent in this field. And he became an advisor to the company. And I said, Julius, your first assignment is, I found these 30 people that are all from Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, you name it, PhDs, all PhDs in audio signal processing. They're all really smart. They've all published papers in music technology, but I want you to rank the 5 smartest out of this list. And he knew them all because they all go to the same conferences. They publish papers, they discuss the papers. And I thought, if I can't do it, maybe he can do it. And so he did rank them. And then there was a list of 5 and boom, we got the number 1 rank as a co-founder of Shazam. So that's how I solved that.
That's really cool. I mean, and that's a lesson in itself. First of all, ski within your limits, right? You know what you didn't know, and you knew enough to reach out and engage an expert in their field and a team and trust. So there's a lot of pieces there that, people, like our audience, like meeting planners can draw from. You addressed, when I asked you earlier, you addressed about making the experience, and you do that and you take all of that into consideration. But if you put yourself into the mind and the mindset of a meeting planner who's the chief cook and the bottle washer for 2 or 3 days of an event, a couple thousand people in a city, a dozen or more hotels, and they're milling about, they need to be fed, they need to be provided content, some of them need continuing education credits and whatnot. There's a lot of those core virtues of your five virtues that you shared with us that can apply to that. Do you see that when you're there on site and you can tell, oh, this was thoughtful, or, gosh, I haven't seen something yet at an event that you'd like to see? Does that question communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love when people think outside the box and just sort of come up with unique solutions to the experience. There was one event I spoke at about a month or two ago. The audience was about almost 2,000 people. It was on a 360 stage. And one thing they had done, it was really great, and it was a great experience. It was in Mexico, actually. And one thing they did is they handed out these little I'm not sure what they were, like rattlers or some type of thing. So that everyone had one at their desk. And so you get, as a speaker, sometimes if you can kind of evoke a response, people sometimes they'll respond verbally, or they might clap and so on
Right.
unexpectedly. And I love the fact that that happens, during the speech. It shows that they're really engaged and really responding to some of the ups and downs in the story. But what I loved is they were all rattling these things. They're sort of rattling. So it wasn't just applause. It was sort of like it was almost like some kind of concert where they're sort of rattling away in response. And it was something I wasn't expecting, but I love that creative sort of input into the experience that the meeting planner had thought of. And it really had a dramatic impact on
Yeah.
the overall experience for everyone.
That kind of like the vuvuzela in South Africa in the World Cup,
Right.
which can over time lose its charm. But that's really cool. And I'm sure that fed into you as the person delivering the keynote, that you fed off that energy and that uniqueness and that first time experience of that. That's pretty cool.
I loved that. I love that. Yeah, it's for me. The main reward of keynote speaking is to feel the audience's reaction, feel that emotional connection. Sometimes there'll even be one coming up in tears from from having experienced the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride, and the feelings of being able to overcome all these things and finally see this outcome. And I also love, even a lot of people typically like to come up and ask, hey, can we do a selfie? I love Shazam, or my kids love Shazam. I want to
Right.
show them. And so I have like a line of selfies, and I actually love doing the selfies afterwards. In fact, I decided I'm going to start capturing these selfies myself
Yeah.
as well, because they're great memories of the experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all that emotional experience. I mean, I think of it like when you watch a great movie, you might watch a comedy, and a comedy movie, there's obviously humor and you laugh. But laughing is just one form of entertainment,
That's
right? There's
right.
also, yeah, there's other movies where dramas, what's going to happen, the tension,
Suspense.
suspense, and then there's also emotion. That's one of my favorite ones. Is like when you watch those movies and you can feel the emotions kind of like just running through your veins as you watch these moments, and that's one of my favorite ones, because when you feel the emotions of like that, oh, we got to be able to do this, but we're not going to. We're almost gonna. We might have to close our doors, and then you've overcome it, and you're able to go back and say to the venture capitalist that told you, no, this is impossible, or no one's ever going to use this. You can go back and say, turns out people will use this, and so it's that emotion of, one of the most rewarding things I think they say is to do what people say you cannot do. It's a quote that I love. To do what people say you cannot do. And the Shazam story is very much that. There were so many people that said we can't do it. And I think people relate to that because we all have that in our life. Many of us have experienced something where people told us, nope, you can't do that. And then we went ahead and we powered through and we did it. It could be a personal thing, could be a professional thing. But
Yeah.
when you do that, that is so incredibly rewarding.
In the case of Shazam, you created a new paradigm. I mean, it was a new metaphor. It was just something from nothing, really. And that's really cool. Like you said, not to take away from Snapchat or Insta, whatever, but they're constructing with elements that were already in existence. And you said, okay, here's this concept, this abstract, and the world around me is in agreement that it's a no, but you were committed. And that's just I think that for me is one of the core virtues of the story that speaks so strongly. Of course, you have to drive through, you have to push through, you have to be connected to it, the experience and everything, but it's so hard to create something from nothing. I every time I use it, I'm just blown away that it works, whether I'm in the lobby of a hotel or in my car or in an airport, and I hear a song and I walk into a store and I can just capture it. It's just so cool. So
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that, Seth. And that's one of the most rewarding things for me as well, is to hear what people feel about using Shazam. A couple of things that I've realized over the years that just are so invigorating and so wonderful for me to hear is that people will often say, it's like magic. And so they literally associate Shazam with magic,
yeah.
Which is such a wonderful thing. But that's one. There's actually three things. The second is that often they'll say, hey, Shazam it. Like they'll use it as a verb. It actually truly has become a verb. And that's sort of a holy grail for so many products that very few actually achieve, is to become a verb. Like you Google something, you Shazam something. And then the third one, and this is the one that actually is the most mind-blowing for me, is that not everyone, but a significant percentage of people will tell you that they remember the first time they use Shazam. And
Ah,
yeah, and they'll say,
very
hey,
cool.
I remember I was with my friend driving in a car and we were on our way to Tucson, Arizona. And then my friend just said, hey, look, let's do this in the car, and identified a song. And it was just such a memorable thing. And what it makes me think of personally is my own mother telling me that she remembers when JFK was shot or when man
Right.
got on the moon. But how many things do you remember the first time you used a MacBook? I don't
Yeah.
remember.
No.
Amazing product.
Not even my iPhone, you know?
Yeah. So it's like, it's a rare thing to achieve, that you can delight someone so much with an innovation that they will, I literally remember the first time they used it. And that's another thing I thought I would start maybe capturing one day, is like all the different places people have been and the experience they had, who they were with and what was happening. Because it's not only just listening to the radio in a car. It could be you're in some little restaurant visiting with a friend. Maybe you're about to get engaged, who knows what. In fact, we like to call it sometimes, all these songs that you Shazam, we like to call it the playlist of your life.
Right.
And sort of like, and you Shazam it and you connect with that music moment that connects with you. But yeah, that's one of the things that makes Shazam really satisfying. And just adding one thing to the point about the innovation and the creation of it.
Yeah,
What was really interesting is that you mentioned a bunch of companies, and all those companies started apps, since the App Store launched in 2008. What's really shocking about Shazam is that we started Shazam 8 years before the App Store. So
Wow.
basically, we invented an app 8 years before apps existed. Talk about innovation, right? I mean, Apple, Steve Jobs at Apple hadn't even thought of the iPhone yet when we invented Shazam, and iTunes and iPod were not yet on the market. So we're quite far ahead of our time creating this app. The original version of Shazam, by the way, you dialed a phone number because there was no apps. We launched in 2002,
Oh
6 years
my.
before apps. You dialed a phone number, a 4-digit phone number on your phone, held your phone in the air. You were making a voice phone call to our IVR system. And then we would record the sound, hang up the call. And then because we had your caller ID, we sent a text message to your phone with the name of the song. That's how Shazam worked when we launched.
Wow, I did not know that, because it's 22 years ago, or 23, 2000. It's just, we could technically kind of use margin of error and say last century. I mean,
Right.
if you want to, if you want to take a little bit of historical fiction there, I mean, it's like something analogous to dial-up, where the modem made all that weird noise.
You're right. It was,
Yeah.
yes. It's well, actually, one of the investors in Shazam was actually, by the way, the inventor of the 56K modem. Speaking of modems, but which is now an ancient technology, but was once very prevalent.
They
But
belong in
yeah,
a museum.
yeah. I mean, the popular phones. I was trying to get one out of a box just now, but it's so tightly wrapped that it's too difficult to unwrap. But I was going to show you remind you what the phones looked like back at the time we launched Shazam. But I bought it on eBay, and it's one of those little old Nokia phones, and I thought I would order it so I can get it while it's still available. And but it's just such a great memory that we were all carrying around those old little Nokia phones and other brands as well.
I think I had like a 6760 or something like that, a Nokia 6000 or something like that. It was very modern at the time. I felt like I was so cool,
Yeah, yeah. I know. We're like, well, look how small my phone is. It's really cool, and I can text really fast by touching the numbers on it. Yeah.
Right. Well, the 3 letters for each digit, right? That's how you texted. There was ABC on one digit, and then and then you went through the alphabet that way. So, Chris, let's shift gears, if we will. The thing that is in the zeitgeist, the mode, the trend, the flavor of the moment, and is here to stay is artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, et cetera, et cetera. AI, artificial intelligence, is here to stay. People are using ChatGPT. I never heard, is it GPT? Is that
That's right.
GPT.
That's the primary one. And then Google has its response to that. That's currently called Bard, BARD.
Right. And I never thought, being a kind of an amateur language guy, I never thought that the word prompt would be so prevalent in the current vernacular and colloquial, use today. I do want to talk about prompts a little bit. What is it that you're working on right now that's really exciting, that has you using artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just make one comment, sort of to
clarify or correct.
It's a precursor to that, really, which is that I can't tell you. I've been in technology for a long time. I mean, I started Shazam 22 years ago, and as I said, joined Google in 2004. So I've been in technology a long time, and I have never been so excited as how much AI has the
Wow.
opportunity to transform the world. I mean,
Just the pure possibility of it has that
it's
spark.
Oh, it's just absolutely incredible, and obviously, with not without concerns, and hoping that we make sure to find a safe way to use AI and one that can benefit us and not harm us, because there's plenty of opportunity for mistakes to be made. When I use things like Chat GPT and Bard, and when I read all the different things that are going on with what's called generative AI and the things that can essentially be creative, create
Right.
artwork and music and pictures and you name it, photos. It's just so fundamentally exciting for how we can amplify the creation that humanity is able to create, and really leverage computation and AI in a way that would transform the world and transform our lives and make sure it's in a positive way. So it's very, very exciting. It's also interesting to watch because while I was at Google, it just felt like we sort of own the world, but Google's really at a fundamental pivot point in its trajectory, because I mean, this is going to really disrupt its business, and if it doesn't respond in the right way, it may be out of business. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Yeah, and
But,
Microsoft is very well positioned.
they are, because they've partnered with ChatGPT. Yeah, that's right. But it will be like, competition's a good thing, and so it will be interesting to see how it plays out with these two main competitors, and maybe more to come with Google and ChatGPT. But essentially, what AI is doing is, there's a saying that Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, who's now a venture capitalist at Andreessen Horowitz, he often likes to say how software is eating the world, right? So he's been saying that for years. So what that means is, like, literally the whole way things are done and businesses and everything are just being eaten by software, and then software becomes the new way that these things are now done. That's been going on for quite some time now. The next stage is AI is going to eat the world. And so many things that were once done by software are going to become irrelevant, and AI will become the new solution for that. But AI is creating many, many, many opportunities, so many things that we can do that were not even a possibility before. Now, what I noted is, getting to what I'm doing specifically, is that in all the years I spent at Google, one thing I always learned, and I also learned this as an entrepreneur founding Shazam, is that typically what happens is that if you're an entrepreneur, you need to raise capital. And the ways you raise funding from venture capitalists, is you tell a story of how you're going to become worth $1 billion or multi-billion-dollar company. So it's all about the money. The money is what attracts the money. And then you need the money to build the business. So people go after the big businesses, the ones that are likely to have huge markets and make a lot of money. Now, that's within entrepreneurial world, and same with the big companies. Like, so whether you're Google, Facebook, or Amazon, when they sit there and brainstorm and prioritize what they're going to work on, they don't say, "Hey, let's build this business that's going to one day make $10 million or $20 million." They want to build a business that's going to one day make billions of dollars. That's why you see them investing in things like self-driving cars and huge markets that will one day be
big moonshots, big ideas,
big moonshots. But here's where I thought there was an interesting opportunity, is that sometimes that leaves behind smaller things that may not be as lucrative, but might still have a very positive impact on the world. And I chose to go after one of those. And that's what I've been incubating for some time. It's called bootstrapping. We like to call it as an entrepreneurs. Bootstrapping basically means that until it becomes more viable, you're really sort of funding it yourself and inching away with your own resources to see what you can accomplish. And then at some point, if you get it to where it needs to get to, then you can, of course, raise external funding, hire people, and get it to the next stage. My startup is called Guard, and Guard is a company that will create a device that will prevent drowning in swimming pools. And what I like to say, it's like combining three things. It's a smoke alarm meets a self-driving car in a swimming pool. So you're combining those three aspects. And the reason it's like a smoke alarm is similar to a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is just adhered to your ceiling, and it's always there, and you don't turn it on or turn it off. It's just always there, ready to detect smoke and then alert you. Similarly, my device will be adhered to the wall of a pool underwater, always there. You don't turn it on or you turn it off, always ready to detect drowning. I want to emphasize drowning, not someone falling in a pool. That's a simple solution, but actually someone in the process of drowning, when you have to react very quickly to save them. Now, it's a device. It's like a self-driving car. Like a self-driving car has many sensors, predominantly cameras, that are viewing the world and then interpreting it using software. It's essentially, it's called computer vision, but computer vision is built on AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So that my device also, for the guard device, will be taking in the world, but rather than navigating the streets and making sure not to run over pedestrians, it's looking at all the people in a pool and then determining whether someone's drowning. And so it's an always-on device in a pool that will detect drowning, and similar to a smoke alarm, would set off piercing alarms both outside of the pool and connected devices inside the house, because it turns out in most drownings occur while someone's home. And so you can actually save them, but you would literally have just a matter of a minute to save them before it's too late and permanent brain damage occurs and death and so on, sadly. And drowning, by the way, unlike the movies where people yell and scream and wave their hands saying, help me, that's not actually how drowning occurs. Right. Someone goes under the water and it's completely silent. So it's a real problem. It's the number one cause of death for children under the age of 5 in the United States, according to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. So that's the number one cause of death, accidental death, exceeding poisonings, gunshots, and even car accidents for children under 5. And it's a real problem, but I can tell you right now, it's not a giant market. So it's not the one that Amazon, Google, Facebook, and even the entrepreneurs who raise tens of millions of dollars from big venture capital firms are going to go after, because there's not a huge amount of money to be made from it. I mean, there's 6 million pools in the US. And so it's enough that it can be a viable business. But the way these big companies and big entrepreneurs think, they go after the big businesses that are going to be worth billions or at least hundreds of millions of dollars. It's never going to be that. So I felt like this is an impact-driven business. It's something that, although I want it to be viable, I really measure it by not how much money it makes, but how many lives it saves.
Yeah. I'm a pretty pedestrian thinker, Chris. So I feel, I'm in awe with, brilliant people like you, and I'm not blowing smoke inauthentically. Is there an insurance impact on that?
That's a great question. Well, I can tell you that usually when you introduce safety into anything, it can reduce the risk, and therefore insurance companies are interested in it. I mean, for example, there's many things you can do to your house that, if you do them, that will make it or more resilient to potential fire risks and so on. And so, yes, absolutely. In a success outcome where this product becomes proven to be viable, useful, effective, you can absolutely imagine partnering with insurance companies who would make it, you might get an insurance discount, for example. If, let's say you have a pool and you install this thing, and let's imagine this device costs $2,000 or $3,000 to put in a pool. By the way, that's a lot of money compared to an iPhone, but it's not a lot of money compared to a $40,000 or $50,000 in-ground pool. But yeah, you can. I would absolutely love to see insurance companies also helping to bridge the gap on that financial investment.
What was there a particular, and if I'm prying here, was there a personal story behind this, or was this something that, like the music, you had always wanted to know what the song was, but you couldn't remember it? What was kind of the seed behind it?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and most people assume it must be the case that I know someone who drowned.
Right.
Fortunately, I don't. I have just one child. I have a son who's 14 years old, and he is not drowned, luckily, or even come close to drowning. But I can tell you there were definitely inspirations. I mean, one inspiration is that I grew up around water. I swam a lot. I was a surfer growing up in San Diego. I have so much respect for the water and the dangers of water. I've had waves hold me down for long periods of time. Second thing is that I'm divorced, and my son was living with his mom for many years. Now he lives with me full time. But while he was living with his mom, she had a pool installed in the ground, a small pool. But it really made me think, oh my gosh, this is a real risk. I mean, my little toddler son is playing, and it just takes a few minutes of distraction and he could fall in a pool. I like to say sometimes a swimming pool to a toddler is like a bottomless, fiery pit. I mean, it's literally just a death trap. And so I recognized that as a real risk that needed to be addressed and to be concerned about for any parent. And then also I was fascinated. I'm always fascinated as an entrepreneur by difficult problems. And so you actually have a difficult problem with a pool. And it's not just on the computer vision AI side, by the way. It's also the hardware design. In fact, very much the hardware design, because one of the challenges you have with a swimming pool, it's just a bunch of concrete poured around a body of water. And so if you want to come into that concrete and provide a device with power always on, and trust me, I've looked into it, like solar is not a highly reliable solution always. It's very difficult because you can't always count on the sun or there's indoor pools or trees or shade and so on. So solar has challenges. Batteries also real challenges. They run out of power. You have to recharge them. And I've really learned with Shazam and Google and Dropbox, where I worked, that basically anytime you introduce some kind of effort or friction for people, like go to recharge the battery every week.
Yeah, forget about it.
It's a
Yeah,
flop. So basically, I realized that there's some real hard problems here as an entrepreneur, not only in the computer vision and AI, but also how do you design hardware that has reliable electric power, but that doesn't require jackhammering the concrete on the side of your pool in order to install, because then you might be looking at a $2,000 device that costs $10,000 to
right.
install. So there's some real challenges in this business, and I love conquering those challenges in creative ways as an entrepreneur to get to that final outcome, because it's all the sweating the details and solving all the little edge cases and so on that leads to the great outcome. And that's why Amazon, for example, was the 16th bookstore on the web, because the first 15 didn't do a very good job of it. It's
Right.
how do you do it really well?
Right.
That's what leads to the great outcome.
And it seems like, not getting ahead of it, but the technology required to have something submerged in water, connected to concrete, pulling away that friction from the user side of it, there might be some technologies there or other businesses that could be ancillary and spin off, which,
Absolutely.
sometimes are the unexpected. We're coming to the end here. This is a really rich conversation. I think we're going to leave a little bit on the table and maybe come back and revisit when AI is in Chat GPT, maybe 15 or something, and we'll see what's been created. I couldn't help but think of this, and I am not by any means religiously observant in an orthodox sense by any way, but the Talmud, which is the interpretation of the Torah, the legal interpretation, and laws come from it, like kosher laws. One of the laws, Chris, says that the father, who's the head of the household, is responsible to teach everybody how to swim. And I don't know why that crossed my mind while I was listening to you, but
Yeah.
you know what? It's something that people need to know. Now, the Talmud in the 3rd century, when these rabbis were interpreting the Torah, a device stuck to the side of a pool wasn't really available at that point. But I just think, my father always told me that, and I always added in the modern world. You have driverless cars and automated driving and everything, but what happens to that one moment where you need to know how to drive a stick shift, right? I would add that to the tasks of people that they need to learn for survival. Anyway, on that weird kind of pivot, I want to move into a little bit more whimsical part of what we do here. 20 questions. It's kind of rapid fire, 1-word answers. Are you ready?
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So but let's jump into it.
Let's do it. All righty. What's the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your resume?
Oh gosh, these are always like the tough ones to do on the spot. I would say the most interesting thing that's not on my resume is that my only American relative is my sister, because my parents are from Europe. My dad's British, my mom's French. And then talk about setting high expectations for me. They're both PhDs in physics. My dad's a professor of nuclear physics. My mom was the first female professor of computer science the first female professor in the engineering department at Oregon State University. And so, gosh, did I feel pressure like I need to come up with something special to meet their expectations? But yeah, so that's probably one thing. And the second is the fact that I have dyslexia, as does my son, and that's been a big influence on the path that I've taken in my life.
Right. My own coaching to me is I'm supposed to do these rapid fire, but I can't resist. So your parents, these high achievers are at the cocktail party with all these PhDs, and they're like, so how's your son doing? Well, he's in the garage playing with music. We're not really sure where it's going, but this rock and roll.
Right. I can tell you, of all the investors that invested in Shazam, and my dad who only put a tiny bit amount in just for fun, was the most difficult. He was like, "Oh, Chris, this is
okay. If I have to, but I'm going to blame it on your American sister."
Yeah, exactly.
All righty, let's continue. What's the last thing you read?
Oh, what is the last thing I read? Right now, I am reading. I have to look at my Audible because I keep flipping between books. Because of course, as a dyslexic, I'm always doing. Oh yeah, as a dyslexic, I am always doing my books in audio form. But right now, I just am rereading a second time the book Creativity Incorporated, which is actually about the founding of Pixar, if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And it's an excellent book with really great stories that I love. And there's so many similarities to pick with Pixar and Shazam, because they also had a very long road of barely surviving. I don't know if you know that, before they finally got to success. They almost went bankrupt for years and years, and they were funded
Wow.
pretty much solely by Steve Jobs. Because Pixar was originally a company that made animation software and computers and hardware, and then they eventually fell into creating animated movies. But yeah, they almost went bankrupt for many years.
What's the most Shazammed song?
Oh no, that embarrassingly, I don't know the answer to that. There's so many most Shazam songs by market, but I will tell you. How about if can I give you a different answer because I don't know the
Yeah,
answer.
absolutely.
Instead, I'm going to give you like a politician. I'll give you a different answer than you were looking for.
No problem.
What I'll give you instead is three interesting facts about Shazam. One about the features. One is that within Shazam charts, you can actually see what are the most Shazammed songs in any specific geography. You could literally go into your
Ah,
city
that's
and
very
see.
cool.
So it's not just like normal charts, like here's the most popular songs in the United States.
Right.
You're literally like, what's the most popular songs in South Carolina or wherever it is. So anyway, so that's one thing. Second thing is if you hold the button down on Shazam, and when you're Shazamming, instead of just touching it, hold it down. It will go into what's called auto Shazam, and it will actually keep Shazamming all night long while you're at a bar or club or anywhere. So you can get a playlist of all the songs you heard that night.
Ooh, high level tip, high level user tip.
Yeah. And then the third thing is that within Shazam settings, you can connect to either Spotify or Apple Music so that all the Shazams you do become a playlist within Spotify or Apple Music if you have an account. Great thing to add. And then the last one is that you can also back it up in iCloud, and then also in Control Center on iPhone, you can add Shazam in the Control Center settings. So it's right there as a button within Control Center. You can always
Yeah,
do. People
right.
love
I
that.
need
That's huge.
that one where it creates playlists automatically. I need to use that one because I do it kind of the roundabout way where I'll find it and then I'll open it up on on wherever, Spotify or whatever, and then I'll like it. So I can
Yeah.
streamline that process. Wow, that's pretty cool. All right, let's just do a few more. Your latest obsession.
My latest obsession right now, I would say it's sort of like identifying the really interesting supplements that can make you feel even more energized. It's
Ah,
amazing how there's all these little things I like researching on. Oh, it's vitamin D or omega-3, and there's just certain things that it turns out just even a healthy, balanced diet doesn't necessarily get
yep,
you enough of. And so I don't believe in just sort of taking millions and millions of vitamins.
yeah.
I think there's sort of a few key ones that are the core ones, and so that's probably my main obsession.
Great. You know what? I actually think that that's a great point to kind of say goodbye on. I just thank you for your thoughtfulness, your generosity. We've covered everything from impacting people's lives through your newest venture, your music conundrum that was resolved, even though there were a lot of naysayers, all the way through to making sure that supplements can improve your longevity and your well-being, and a lot in between there. I just so appreciate you sharing your story. There's so much there for everybody to take away, and hopefully we can have you back and continue the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a delightful discussion, so I enjoyed it.
Very cool. Thanks for spending time with us today. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to our content. We'll keep bringing you the latest industry news and insights. Don't forget to follow us on social media so you never miss an update. And if you're looking for a keynote speaker for your next event, reach out to us directly or visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com.